Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coming Up Milhouse. And it is still October, so we are still reviewing Treehouse of Horror episodes. And today's episode was from season 8. It's Treehouse of Horror number 7. And this is actually the first episode in season 8.
That is correct, and it gets 3 stories as they usually do. The first one is called The Thing and I. The second one is The Genesis Tub, and then the third one is Citizen Kang. And we get some Kane and Kodos fun with that one, and they're all pretty decent. I like them all. You got a special one that you like the most?
My favorite is Citizen Kang. I actually go backwards. So Citizen Kang, and then the Genesis Tub, and then The Thing and I.
Yeah, you and I are on the same wavelength there. Yeah, it starts with the lesser of the 3, which isn't a bad one, by the way.
It's not a bad one.
But, gets us into it, and then it ends strong with a lot of good political satire for 1996. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But first, let's do what we always do and kick it off with lines. Give me your line number 1.
Oh, boy. See you, Marge. Who needs a car wash when you can just drive around in the rain?
And that was in the first story, right?
So Marge and Homer leave the house and leave the kids up to their own shenanigans, and they explore the attic and find out what's been hiding in the attic. And the whole purpose, it seems, they didn't go out on a date, or maybe they did, but they didn't go to dinner or a movie. They just went out to drive around in the rain to get a free car wash. So sounds about right with The Simpsons.
That is a good one. I'm going to actually do one from that story as well, and this has to do with the big reveal that Bart has a conjoined brother named Hugo, and Dr. Hibbert is telling the backstory of it, and one is evil, one isn't. They decide Bart's the non-evil one. Of course, there's a twist. We'll talk about that. But then there's Hugo, and then Dr. Hibbert says, "What to do with Hugo? Too crazy for Boys Town. Too much of a boy for Crazy Town."
And he's just a baby at that point.
Because they separated him. You think it's with a paper cutter, but that was just to cut the birth certificate and 2 points or whatever. Twins.
I know, the birth certificate was in a perforated paper, so they got a skinny piece for each of them, like conjoined twins. So.
Yep. So that I like that. Episode. Too much of a boy for Crazy Town.
So, do you have a quote from each of the segments written down?
I did.
Okay, so let's do that. So we each shared one from episode or segment 1, and now we'll go share segment 2 and segment 3.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Yep. Give me your next one.
So my next one is, and then flush. It's toilet time for Tiny Town. And that was Bart. In segment number 2, Lisa decides to pour some soda over a tooth that she just lost for her science experiment to see what happens, to see if it decays the tooth any faster or dissolves it, like there are rumors that do that. And Bart is experimenting with some static electricity, and the combined effort of the two create a tiny little town on Lisa's tooth for her science experiment. What about you?
Well, my second line, the line from this story, has to do with this colony inside this dish that Lisa creates is evolving rapidly. So it goes from the Stone Age to a far-off future high-tech world, and they bring Lisa into this world via a shrinking ray because they think she's God. And when we get there, one of the people in this little town is a lot like Dr. Frank. He just looks and sounds a lot like him, and he says, "It worked! The debigulator worked!" And then a little bit later, she's like, all right, make me bigger so I can go deal with Bart. And he's like, wow, that would require some sort of rebigulator. And the concept of that is just boggling. He doesn't have a rebigulator, but he's got a debigulator. So Professor Frank, little guy that looked like him, I like that.
Yep. Good one. And then from the third segment, which is Citizen Kang, I actually wrote down quite a few from that, but I'm going to go with these candidates make me want to vomit in terror. That was Homer. So Kang and Kodos, who are brother and sister, decide to run for president, and it doesn't really matter which one of them wins, and they have taken on the 1996 presidency candidates of Dole and Clinton, and they are seen walking around town holding hands, and it's just a good satire for the presidential election for that year. So these candidates make me want to vomit in terror was a pretty good line.
All right, and my line from that story is Kang and Kodos abduct Homer, and Homer says, I suppose you want to probe me. Well, let's get it over with. He pulls his pants down, and then Kang is like, halt! We've reached the limit of what rectal probing can teach us.
Yes.
That's the best line of the whole episode, in my opinion. So there it goes.
There were some other good ones.
There were a lot of good ones, but that's the top.
It was really good. Yes. Another one I wrote down that I thought was really great when he gets abducted is, oh my God, space aliens, don't eat me. I have a family. Eat them.
Yes.
So that's, and those quotes and more are why that becomes my favorite segment in this little episode.
Many good ones there.
What about your favorite scene?
All right, so I kind of went back and forth. There were a lot of good ones, but I'm going to go to my favorite segment, the Citizen Kang, and it's the way the aliens abduct people, specifically Homer. They don't have a beam-up ray like Star Trek or anything like that. They travel however many light years, and they got a little claw arm that's like that arcade thing that picks up...
The claw!
Yeah, that picks up stuffed animals, They got one of them that's got three things. It picks up Homer and drops him in. It does the same thing to Clinton. The fact that they got this claw arm is the best, so... I went with Homer's abduction because that was great.
Well, and the first time that they use the claw on Homer, they pick him up by his face, and then they drop him. He's out fishing, and so then they drop him in the water, and then the claw goes down under the water and picks him up by the neck, basically, the scruff of his neck, and pulls him up to the spaceship. So it is pretty great. Well, shocker, I also went with the scene from that segment, and I love the debate between Dole and Clinton. And Kang and Kodos are, of course, they've transformed themselves to be the presidential candidates. And Clinton is twirling, whirling, and then, of course, I mentioned that they're holding hands. So it's just, doesn't matter who wins. They just, either one, either way, they're winners. So I went with that scene. There are definitely some really great scenes in this whole episode. The other two segments have some really fun moments as well. So,
definitely.
How about your winner?
I am going to go to the Genesis tub one, and I'm giving it to Lisa's little colony of people that she's growing because Bart antagonizes them by crushing some of their town with his finger. And they grow spaceships and go after him with lasers. And I'm like, dude, you guys are serious. They evolve spaceships, fly out to Bart's room and start shooting them in the face with lasers. And I figured, you know what? They were able to get that far along pretty quickly. And I got to give them props for that. So they're my winners.
Well, I also went with a winner from that segment, and mentioning who you mentioned before in a quote, I went with the Frank-like character because he created a debigulator, and it successfully worked, where I feel like the Springfield version of Dr. Frank, sometimes his experiments don't work at all. And granted, as you mentioned, this Frank character doesn't have a rebigulator, but his debigulator actually worked.
Mm-hmm. That's a good observation, because Frank's stuff doesn't always fly, but in this case it did, so
Yep.
very cool.
So definitely the colonists in Lisa's tooth are winners this episode. What about your loser?
So I am actually gonna give a little props to the first one and the Thing and I, and I'm gonna give Hugo a little bit of the loser, and it's mostly because he gets fooled by Dr. Hibbert because he's up in the attic and causing some shenanigans, and Dr. Hibbert wants to subdue him in some way, and he says, "You've never even seen yourself in the mirror," and he holds up a frame that's got nothing in it. Hugo looks at the frame thinking he's going to see his reflection, and then bam, gets punched in the face and knocked out. Now, it turns out that he's actually was the good brother and Bart was the bad brother. That's the twist. So, I mean, he kind of came out on top at the end of the thing. But the fact that he was sucker punched by Hibbert and knocked out, that's why I went with that.
Well, since you went with Hugo, I'm going to go with my backup, and I'm going with the waffle iron from that segment, because Lisa gets pulled down to the kitchen for breakfast, and Marge has made waffles, which are just really square pancakes, because the waffle iron has been in the shop for quite some time. And I'm saying this as a loser because I feel like the waffle iron has likely been in the shop because Homer used it in one of the episodes to make his patented space waffles with all the caramel. And so I just feel like that's
that's a tie back to that, isn't it?
I feel
he made
like
his
so.
patented moon waffle.
Yep, his moon
and
waffle.
ruined the waffle
with
iron.
all of his caramel and his
Liquid smoke and all that.
Poor waffle
From
iron
that way back episode.
has been, I'm pretty
It's
sure.
been in the shop ever since that episode 4 seasons earlier.
So
or
instead of
whatever
buying a new waffle iron, that one's been in the shop.
Marge
for
makes square pancakes.
how many episodes? How many seasons? So,
I love it. That is a great.
Going with that.
That is a great observation. Very cool.
And that's what Coming Up Milhouse is all about. This is, of course, Treehouse of Terror, episode 7, which is the first episode in season 8. You can find that on some streaming services or watch it on DVD. And I'm sure you can find some great clips on YouTube as well. Feel free to share your favorites in the comments. Give us a thumbs up if you like this, and be sure to subscribe.
That's right. We'll be coming back at you with some more Halloween season fun before this October is over. But until the next time,
Jiminy
Jokers!
Ket Brockman here with Campaign 96. America flips a coin. At an appearance this morning, President Clinton made some rather cryptic remarks, which aides attributed to an overly tight necktie.
I am Clinton. As Overlord, all will kneel trembling before me and obey my brutal commands. End communication.
That's Slick Willie for you, always with the smooth talk.